welcome to our all-new series on sports tourism, The Way Ahead, brought to you by the Dope.News and Travel.Earth. In the next few weeks, we will be chatting with some of most recognized individuals in global sports, hospitality, and tourism. And to start with, we have with us today Charlie Charters, a former rugby union official, a thriller book author, sports presenter, and one of very popular sports executive for over 25 years now. He was head of sales for match hospitality for 2 FIFA World Cup cycles, and currently he's a co-founder and managing director of Daimani in Asia. Brought up in Fiji, educated in the UK, and currently residing in Hong Kong, a truly global citizen, an extremely knowledgeable individual. Welcome, Charlie, to our show. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. I understand you are in Yorkshire. You've just traveled from Hong Kong. You are looking, you must be tired with your long journey. So thank you once again for joining us. Let me ask you, my first question obviously was to let our viewers know something about your professional journey. And especially, I would also want to hear from you about your experience with Indian market.
To my teenage children, my professional career. And I've basically been doing that in order to tell them, do not do what I did, which is to travel haphazardly from one industry to another. I started in television rights and sponsorship in sports marketing, and then I zigzagged to sports administration, and then I completely left sport and tried to make it as an author. And although I got a book published, it wasn't the big hit that I needed it to be. And then I went back into sport, but instead of being in the glamorous multi-billion-dollar industry of television rights and sponsorship, I was very fortunate to find an opportunity with a company called Match Hospitality, who are the rights holders of the FIFA World Cup hospitality program, and have been running the FIFA World Cup since 2010. 2014 and 2018. So I was their head of sales for the last 2 FIFA World Cups, which was a great privilege. But it also enabled me to be able to discover the sort of global markets that were of greatest promise. And obviously one of those was in India, which was obviously, Shashank, the first time that we had the good fortune to meet.
Great. So I'm trying to extend this question. I mean, how many times would have you visited India by now throughout your career?
I would have said comfortably 50 at least. I started coming to India in the early 1990s when I was working for a company called AFC Marketing. And we were doing the marketing for the Asian Football Confederation. And we used to come because at that stage, the All India Football Federation was the kind of shining light in South Asian football, as it still is today. Mm-hmm. And I was part of the team that created what was then called the SAF Championship, the South Asian Football Federation Championship. And we had our first tournament in Sri Lanka in 1995, I seem to remember, which was one of the, if not the first time, one of the first international outings for a young player called Baichung Bhutia. So I've been going in and out of India many times. It's one of my all-time favorite countries, but like a lot of people will observe, it also has unique frustrations. Which I'm very glad continue to exist, because they give me an opportunity to return.
And I'm sure, and we keep seeing you coming to India quite often in your current role as well.
One of the great joys about India is watching the market grow and having a small role to play in making people's dreams come true. The Indian middle class market is growing. And it's fantastic to be able to see people begin to want to travel beyond the borders, begin to want to attend matches that for a long time they've only been able to consume on television. And whether I was working for Match Hospitality or now in my role leading Daimani in Asia Pacific, we're selling official ticket plus hospitality packages, which means everything's guaranteed, everything is above board and safe. And these are the packages that mean the most to this new market. They want to be able to go to travel to experience these blue ribbon events, and it's fantastic. I mean, genuinely, it's an uplifting experience, being able to connect the supply, where we're acting as an agent, and the demand side, whether that's through travel agents or direct through our sales platform. It's a great process watching that. And as I said, the many times where I've met my customers outside the Luzhniki Stadium at the FIFA World Cup, and you get to meet the husband who's taking the wife and the two kids, you really are very grateful to have played a small role in delivering that once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, these experiences certainly are once in a lifetime. And I mean, initially when you would have started coming to India 10, 15 years back, there would hardly been 2 or 3 players into this field. And today there are more than 20 and probably growing year by year. So yes, India definitely is a promising market. And as I said, I mean, we will continue to keep seeing you coming here again and again.
Absolutely, definitely. For me, it's one of the great markets. China is obviously a bigger market by numbers, but in a way, China is a more kind of complicated market because it's more prone to trade disputes and political disputes and disruptions, which really, from a travel industry side, seem to present a kind of lose-lose proposition. So we're obviously in one of those at the moment, where it's very difficult to engage Chinese customers or third-party Chinese sales agents with things like going to North America to watch the NBA or the NFL, because there's a big overlay of politics. Now, I'm not saying that India is politics-free, but it's almost as if India has the sense to realize that actually sport and music and culture transcends the kind of the cut thrust of politics, in a way that means that whatever is the relationship between the UK government or the EU and India, Lords is still Lords. A fantastic concert at the O2 is still a fantastic concert at the O2. And Roland Garros is still, one of the premier tennis experiences of all time. And from that point of view, it means that the sort of transactional side of India is more straightforward than for instance, China is, particularly at the moment.
Great. So, coming to COVID-19, the most talked about issue, what do you think the impact has been on the industry as a whole? Could you quantify the impact of the pandemic to your company or the entire industry in general?
Well, I think it's been terrible. Obviously, we sell official hospitality packages to live events, and those of us who were in Asia, I'm based in Hong Kong, we had an understanding by the end of December, beginning of January, that something very ugly was happening. And because Hong Kong had gone through SARS in 2003, there was a special sensitivity that's kind of carried in the soul of people in Hong Kong, that perhaps meant that those of us who worked in Hong Kong were more suspicious of the news, more inclined to believe that something truly awful was happening than perhaps anybody else consuming news at around that time. So we began to see already at that stage a considerable drop-off in interest and purchasing. But it obviously reached a peak around about March 11th, 12th, when the WHO confirmed a pandemic status. So as a member of the live event industry, we were one of the first companies to, as it were, go into the crisis. And it appears we'll be one of the last kind of branches of the industry to emerge. So it's very difficult. And there's not much really that one can pretend. One can point to sort of green shoots of recovery. For instance, the Super Rugby Aotearoa in New Zealand is great, but the reality is that New Zealand is closed off. So as great as that is, it's very much in this kind of domestic silo, and we're beginning to see the same thing in Australia. Australia is beginning to relaunch rugby union. Obviously, rugby league started about a month ago, but even then, the news today was that the border between Victoria and New South Wales was closed off because there's been an upsurge in cases in Victoria. And I don't know about you. I mean, I'm personally astonished. I didn't even realize that it was possible to have a border between Victoria and New South Wales. But that's just my misunderstanding of the history of the Commonwealth of Australia. But it gives you an idea of, even when you think that you've got over the worst of it, there's still the opportunity for this thing to overtake you again. So I write a journal called the Daimani Journal, in which we try to keep people up to date with the news in the VIP hospitality industry, and we try to share the good news. The bad news is very easy to find, but we're not ridiculous optimists. We're just trying to suggest that overall things are getting better. And there is a pathway forward, although there are lots of countries, and unfortunately India is one of them, where I think the worst is still ahead. And it's just a matter of just moving slowly through this, not being a crazy optimist. As I said, I read a long article about something called the Stockdale Paradox, which I found fascinating. This was a vice admiral who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7 years, and he was eventually released. And when he came to write his biography, he was asked about the sort of people who survived in the camps that we've come to know as the Hanoi Hilton. And his biographer asked him who suffered the worst. And he said, it's very easy, the optimists. The optimists were of the belief that this will be over by Christmas. And when it wasn't over by Christmas, they said it'll be over by Easter. And when it wasn't over by Easter, they said it'll be over by Labor Day, and it wasn't. And then it was Thanksgiving. And by the end of the year, they were absolutely heartbroken. And they were the ones, not just emotionally, but physically, who failed the first. So the Stockdale Paradox is to realize that this won't last forever. This will come to an end, but it's going to be awful between now and when it does end, and we just have to keep on walking forward. It's not a sexy management concept, but it's kind of grounded in reality, and it's certainly the reality that I see at the moment, both within the industry, but also in terms of markets in Asia, like India, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I do buy your point about being crazily optimistic, but yeah, there's some good signs somewhere. It had to be started. So some good signs that the live sports have already begun. I mean, we saw the Formula One also kicking off this weekend, even though without fans, but at least somewhere things have started. I'm not completely writing it off. I personally believe nothing is going to happen this year, and even the next year we should expect at least the first couple of months or maybe 3 months to be completely written off. I'm not counting the business to even be considered before March. But yes, optimism is important, and it will continue. The world will continue the same way. I had one more question, related to COVID, and I just wanted to understand. We are all in live events, so with COVID-19, there are issues of cancellations, postponements, rescheduling of events. How have you been able to handle issues related with vendor, organization, customer relationships? Because obviously the events are not being cancelled, it is being postponed. The organizers would expect the ticket credits to be carried forward, and there have been huge hue and cry, especially in our markets, about cancellations by customers. How are you seeing that globally?
It's a very challenging issue. We're slightly fortunate working with Daimani in that our platform isn't actually a vendor. We're literally a transactional platform. So if you take Wimbledon, for instance, we work with Keith Prowse, who is the official hospitality rights holder, and the customer purchases the Wimbledon official package over our platform and signs and acknowledges the Keith Prowse terms and conditions. So the cancellation kind of clause or protection on behalf of the customer is actually that of the official rights holder. Now, that was an event, obviously, that was cancelled, and it was frustrating for us because we sold a lot, but the money had to be returned to the customer, which is fine, but so did our commission, which was the frustrating part. I think the issues are easier if you are involved in the either buying or selling or acting as an agent on behalf of official packages, because there, if it's a proper event, well structured, with a resourceful and transparent business model, then there should be no issue in being able to claim back your money. Where it gets very dangerous, but honestly the whole industry is dangerous, is in the secondary ticket market, where people have bought on risk, and honestly the whole structure is much more grey. There is a particular issue that is, as wonderful as it is that the live event industry is beginning to restart, as you pointed out, with Formula One this last weekend. So you're beginning to see, although it's great that the Premier League is up and running, when does the next season of the Premier League start? If this season is not even close to being finished. So there are still lots of kind of downstream issues that need to be worked through. But it doesn't give me any pleasure to say this, but if cancellation and refunds are the big anxiety, then the best way to resolve those and address those is only by official, because that's the quickest and most efficient way for the customer to be able to get that money back.
Yeah, I mean, and that's many customers would have realized. I mean, those who have opted for secondary market by their choice or felt that they were cheaper, probably would have had a lesson by now. And I completely, agree to your point that customers should only look at official options and nothing else. Charlie, you are right now working on the Daimani, and we have already had a chat, and I had a look at your product and options as well. How do you think, artificial intelligence and technology, I mean, you have seen the phases in the last 20 years, things changing from a manual transcription to completely going technological now. How do you think technology and AI is going to impact the future of sports ticketing, sports hospitality, and tourism overall?
I think it's going to be fascinating. I mean, you know this, Shashank, because you've met me, but I'm very tall, and I'm also, as my wife will no doubt inform anybody who wants to contact her, I'm very overweight, and every so often I have to buy new shirts, and so I put into Google 4XL shirts, extra long. And I do some, kind of browsing around, and then obviously what happens next. My Google feed is then Facebook and Instagram and all the rest of it is absolutely full of prompts from companies selling shirts that are basically my size. Part of me thinks, well, that's a bit weird. I don't want everybody to know that I'm overweight, but in reality, if I'm a Manchester United fan, or if I've been dreaming about going to the Hong Kong Sevens or the Singapore Grand Prix or the Olympics, and I've just been kind of browsing around the subject, this idea that the technology is out there to prompt me, to encourage me. Perhaps the packages are discounted at some point, or I was looking at one particular match, but actually there's a cheaper option a week later. I think that's great. I mean, I genuinely think that is great, and to the extent that countries like India and China are so much more advanced than the equivalent consumers in Western Europe, I think it's going to be those markets that really benefit the most by being able to see a buying landscape that is curated around what they want and not curated around what they don't want or is unnecessary or just kind of noise.
You undoubtedly are one of the most interesting person I've met in this entire industry, and I always feel like talking to you on probably every topic, and I know it is very surprising and interesting that you are open to even discuss about anything within our country, even though you have visited us 50 times. You probably know in some factors you know more than what I know about this industry and this particular countries.
Well, I was very fortunate to be brought up in Fiji, and as you know, Fiji is one of those countries that has benefited immensely from the Indian diaspora. So I was raised from a young age on Agent Vinod films, on the ghazals of Lata Mangeshkar.
Oh, wow.
So I genuinely feel like India, it's not my first home, but it's definitely up there in my favorite second homes.
Great. Thank you so much, Charlie. Thanks once again for your time, and we'll look forward to host you once again on this show very soon. Well, that was Charlie Charters, who probably is one of the most interesting person I've come across this industry, and it's always a pleasure to chat with him. It was a great insight shared by him. And to summarize, the sports travel industry cannot be written off. It's a tough time. This will pass soon, and we can expect business to be back to normal. For more such interesting contents and shows, like and subscribe our channel and share it with your friends and colleagues. We'll be happy to hear your feedback in the comment section. Till we come back with another interesting conversation, goodbye, stay safe and stay healthy.